Welcome, viewers and listeners, to the Health Revolution, the program that shows you how to have a life of vibrant well-being. In a world full of noisy health trends, we bring you clarity. In a sea of fads, we reveal the science-backed strategies that truly work. We explore physical strength, emotional resilience, and mental mastery. These are the keys to an enriched life. Join us for inspiring interviews with champions who conquered life's health challenges, fueling your journey. Are you ready to unlock your potential? To live with vitality and purpose? Then join the Health Revolution. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, health and fitness expert, speaker, and a mom who understands. Let's embark on this transformative quest. Together, we're about to change the game, starting now. The information provided in this show is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only. Viewers should use their own discretion and consult with a healthcare professional for personalized guidance and recommendations. Welcome, everybody, to Season 3 of the Health Revolution. We are extremely excited that you are here joining us today. I'm your host, Adriana Morrison, and we are kicking off strong with Season 3. We are thrilled that you are here. And of course, no matter which way you're tuning into us, whether it's Roku, Apple, Amazon Fire, LinkedIn, any of the social media handles, please do not forget to hit the subscribe button. We want to stay connected to you. In addition, remember that at the bottom of your screen, there's a little tab for show episode notes. You want to be mindful of that because there's going to be valuable information about our episode today. So as we're rolling into it and we're starting off Season 3, it's a time to talk about what it means to face mortality. Our episode today is called Facing Mortality, and it is a topic in which can be a little bit touchy for us to discuss, especially as we are optimizing our life and we're doing all things to live life fully. And yet at the end of it all, how are we supposed to conclude? How do we prepare? What do we do in order to make sure that we are living and concluding our life in life's terms, the effect on us, on our family, and all of that? We're going to talk about that today so that we can make the uncomfortable topic a bit more comfortable to talk about and worth digging into. My guest today is an incredible gentleman who is well-versed in this. Let's get to know him first. Take a look at this. Meet Greg Barnsdale, an extraordinary undertaker with a unique perspective on end-of-life planning. After years of advising others to get your financial affairs in order and authoring a book to inspire people, Greg faced his own mortality with the diagnosis of a large brain tumor. Opting for surgery, he emerged with a powerful message few others share. As a certified financial planner, certified executor advisor, hospice volunteer, and death doula, Greg's insights highlight how end-of-life planning reduces stress, improves family harmony, and even bolsters the economy. His compelling story encourages us to confront death and live more fully. Greg Barnsdale, welcome to the Health Revolution. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you, Adriana. Thank you for having me here today.
I'm excited to talk about this, even though this is a not as a comfortable conversation to talk about. What makes it so hard to talk about our mortality, and where is the gap in what we need to do to plan end of life and where we are today?
Well, it's an uncomfortable topic, Adriana, because we automatically assume that each day is going to continue on just like yesterday. And to, for most of us, that is the way that it plays out. But based on what I have seen as a funeral director and working in various funeral homes and for one of the largest mortuary agencies in all of Canada, that certainly doesn't play out for a fair number of people that actually do pass away. And I've seen so many situations where people did not plan in any sense of the word, no will, no discussions with their family members, and all those sorts of things make it incredibly difficult at the time of a death.
And when we think about what this means for our life, what are some of the consequences that come out of not talking about our about the planning and what happens after we pass?
Well, a lot of turmoil. You had mentioned the word or the phrase emotional resilience in your introduction, I believe, and that's one of the key things that the process of proactive planning it actually provides to our children, our survivors that live on beyond us. The process of planning not only reduces the stress of aging, but it also leaves them in a position of strength where they are more emotionally resilient and financially resilient too.
Does this mean that oftentimes people make decisions based on emotions, and so they steer far from that being the case, that they're able to talk about it?
That they do, and especially when there haven't been discussions in regards to what the deceased wanted, with emotions running really high and people wanting to be involved in those types of discussions. I've seen situations where, in many cases, Adriana, family members were actually arguing in the arrangement office of the funeral home and couldn't agree on what was to take place.
How early would someone need to plan for the future? Because obviously, tomorrow's not promised to anyone, and we don't know when our time is up. So someone could pass when they're considerably younger and not necessarily in their old age. But when do you when is it a great time, and not great, but when is it optimal to start planning so that this way this is lined and this is taken care of early on?
I would say the optimal time to start to lean into this sort of planning, Adriana, and get a will in place as an example, is when we start to raise a family. That's when a lot of people really start to think about these sorts of things because of that additional responsibility of being a parent. And that's the optimal time. But so many people put these things off thinking, well, but some may feel they don't have enough to make it worthwhile. Others may feel that it's too expensive to set up, which is not necessarily the case at all. But the sooner the better, because as you said, we don't know when our life is going to end, and many people die suddenly.
So I got to ask, what made you become a funeral director?
Well, it was my guidance counselor in high school. Actually, my first choice was to become a helicopter pilot, but I didn't have enough physics, and my backup was to go to funeral school to become a funeral director, and that again, that was based on her advice.
So did she see something in you that represented stoicism, that you could lead others through the process of bringing life to a close like this? Was this something that she shared with you that she saw?
Well, she didn't come out and say those sorts of things. This was a heck of a long time ago, I have to admit. But I don't recall her saying anything specific like that. And I was only the second or maybe third student in this rather small high school that I went to that had actually pursued this career. But it was just a general hunch, I guess, that she had that I should consider.
So in your expertise of being a funeral director, what are some unusual circumstances that have come up with family with preparation and planning that really just took the transition process way off base for a family just struggling with this portion of their lives?
Well, when I first started in the funeral business back in the late '80s, it evolved to the point through the '90s where I noticed a trend with some of my peers in the industry. They would say the same sort of thing, that they over time they were required to fill out uh, what, for sake of a better term, was a family dynamics sheet, and the funeral director arranging the funeral would have to write down if so and so wasn't talking to so and so, because the incoming funeral director, if I happened to be off the day of the funeral and it was my scheduled day off, I would have to basically introduce the funeral director who was getting involved to the family and let him or her know the dynamics. And quite often, as time evolved, there were situations where families were just so torn apart in these types of cases, and it came to light at the time of a death.
So I can only imagine just the emotional tug of war that's going on. And I can't help but wonder, was how did you draw the line in the sand between protocol of that preparation on your end as funeral director and adhering to legal decisions that could or couldn't be made based on family, that who can say what, and then just the legalities behind that? I can only imagine it can get pretty murky. So how did you draw that line in the sand, and what were some of your takeaways that you took into your book, which we'll talk about shortly?
Yes. Well, the most important thing for all of us to have in place is a current and valid will, because that is really the only way that we can stipulate who we want to wrap up our life. And relating back to what I've seen, Adriana, in the funeral industry, I have seen all kinds of situations, far too many, where a will was not prepared. In quite a number of cases, the family members didn't even know if the deceased had a will, let alone where it might be. And that alone was a huge issue. But again, as time evolved through the 80s and 90s, as I worked in the industry, it became very clear to the funeral directors arranging the funerals, and again, speaking with my peers and such, that we had to make sure we were dealing with the decision maker, the correct person that was actually in charge, which typically is the executor.
And can you name a scenario? Obviously, names withheld, but can you name a scenario where it could it's a common situation of a family coming together to bury their loved one that really just became a really bad legal entanglement that didn't have to be? Could you name one where things really went off the rails that we could learn from?
Yes. I recall one situation years ago, Adriana, where a family actually at the cemetery got into a fist fight. And can you imagine, families, I know there must be dysfunction in almost every family out there, it seems, at least to some degree. But for weddings and funerals, we are basically forced to get together, right?
Yes, that's a great way of saying it. We're forced to get together.
So when we're forced to get together, although there may be some differences and animosity between family members, I think to a large degree we do our best to keep it together and get along for the sake of that event, to take the high road, in other words. But I'll never forget this one situation where a family actually ended up arguing and getting into a fist fight, and I thought, phew, what a disastrous time that could have, I hopefully could have been played out better, but it was just terrible to see.
How did it resolve itself? Did everyone just kind of dissipate, or did they have to be separated in that situation?
Well, some other family members stepped in and basically pulled the people apart that were fighting. But I'm sure in many of the situations that I have seen over the years working in the funeral business, I'm sure a fair number of them did end up in one way or another having some sort of court involvement, especially that one.
So then the legal aspect behind that, I think a lot of people are intimidated by the costs that come with just taking care of loved ones and end of life preparations and all of that. How expensive can it get? And in terms of funeral planning, and what is the misconception about that this is such a taboo topic for conversation?
Well, I think the reason that it's for the most part a taboo topic, Adriana, is the fact that people get really, some people get totally freaked out by it and don't want to talk about it at all. Whereas others, I've talked to some financial planning clients as an example and suggested that they go home and talk to their parents or their children about, what they want to have happen, if they prefer to be cremated and where they want their ashes buried or spread, that sort of thing. And then I later find out that they attempt to have those conversations, and the other family members shut them down, saying, "Oh, I don't want to talk about that," or whatever. So it can be very tough, and I think superstition also plays into this too. Some people are very superstitious, and I've talked to many people who won't even sign up to donate their organs or get a will because they think it'll lead to some bad things happening to them.
Now that's more of a cultural. That's oftentimes that's a cultural basis behind that, and so I definitely agree with you. Now you are in Canada, and so in North America, have you noticed some trends about really diving into this as you've begun to have more conversations and you're talking to those just in different societal situations? What are you noticing about having that conversation?
Well, let me first flip back to your other point, Adriana, about cost. Society in general, and this is taking place all across Canada and the US, and I'm sure in other parts of the world too, society doesn't seem to hold the same value toward a traditional funeral as was in the past. The average cost, as I write in my book, for an average funeral in the US used to be about $6,600. And I quote the source where that comes from within the book. But generally now, people aren't having 2 days of visitation in a church mass and in a procession to the cemetery. Quite often, in a number of cases, they're just having something more simple and more straightforward. Maybe visitation an hour before, and then a service in the funeral home or something. And in some cases, they're not having anything at all. They just want mom or dad taken to the crematorium and for the funeral home or funeral provider to do the basic paperwork, and that's all they want. So there's a lot of change taking place in the funeral industry.
You know, prior to you and I meeting and of course talking before today, I never gave thought, and as you're talking about this and the costs, you are so right in terms about the gathering, that the two situations in life in which we are forced to gather, the weddings and then the funerals. And I see the commonality behind the planning and preparation and the cost. And I think that it seems like the cost is intimidating. And since we don't have to, so I can imagine the typical person saying, well, I don't want to think about that. And all the costs, that the financial and the emotional it's just kind of ick. So we'll just not talk about it. So I guess I can see why it's easier to just push that off to the side. And do you find that cost scares a lot of people, and that's the reason why it's just not talked about sooner than later?
Well, I think that's certainly a factor within the whole embracing this whole type of message. But I think the biggest thing, Adriana, is the fact that facing the fact that at some point our life will end, and hopefully it's a long way off, and we have a good quality of life from now until the day we die. But coming to terms with that fact that we're not going to get out of this world alive, I think it's just it's a very uncomfortable thought that people would rather just focus on other fun things. And I get it. I do.
And so I'm thinking that with that planning, sometimes it could be the cultural situation of, well, this is how my family has always handled it, so I'm just going to do the same. So then to start having conversations, that's not a historical thing that we've done, even though you mentioned elements of the preparation, the church service, the gathering, the wake, and just the procession and all of that. So it's almost like when I think about stuff like that, it almost seems like, well, that was just more, that's almost like ritualistic, but no one really, you just kind of go with it. And so yes.
Yes.
And so one thing that I'm thinking about is, what is the first step? And I know before we go to break, what's the first step that you always like to do to help to take the edge off of a conversation like this?
Well, my new tagline that I have come up with is, "What is your legacy?" And it relates to that type of question. We're always building a legacy in our everyday lives with our children and all those around us, what they'll remember us for and how we treat people, etc. But when we're gone, we're gone. And most of us want to have something that lives on beyond us. So to answer your question, whether I was, well, this more so applied when I was a financial planner, talking to people about their retirement and then their estate and what they want to basically live beyond them, their legacy. So I would tend to ask people, what do you want to be remembered for?
And that's a great question to really dive into that. We're going to get more into this. First, we're going to take a break. Stay right there. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Hey everyone, welcome back to Fit Bites with Adriana. As temperatures rise, it's crucial to talk about a serious heat-related issue, heat stroke. Let's dive into what it is, the warning signs, and how to prevent it. Heat stroke occurs when your body overheats, typically as a result of prolonged exposure to or physical exertion in high temperatures. Now, this is the most severe form of heat injury and can occur if your body temperature rises to 104 degrees Fahrenheit or 40 degrees Celsius or higher. Now, the warning signs include throbbing headache, dizziness, muscle weakness, nausea, confusion, and a rapid heartbeat. You might also stop sweating, even if it's very hot. To prevent heat stroke, stay hydrated and wear loose, lightweight clothing when you're out in the sun. Take frequent breaks in the shade or indoors and never underestimate the power of a cool, refreshing drink to help lower your body temperature. Remember, heat stroke is an emergency if you or someone else exhibits these symptoms. Please seek medical help immediately. Stay safe and keep cool. Tune in next time for more Fit Bites, and here's to enjoying the summer safely.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I live in Colorado with a very active lifestyle where my family and I race horses and rodeo. I'm happy to share an amazing technology that has changed my life. 6 months ago, my friend introduced me to a wearable nanocrystal technology that is activated through phototherapy, or your own body's light. With this technology, this little patch is able to increase the copper GHK peptides in your body, which can reactivate stem cells. The beautiful thing about stem cells is that it goes in your body and fixes whatever's broken. If you would like to experience more energy, better sleep, weight loss, or countless other benefits, click on the QR code below to find the younger, healthier you with this affordable technology that I have seen change hundreds of lives.
Welcome back to the Health Revolution. Welcome back, everybody. My guest today, Greg Barnsdale, he is the unusual undertaker. He is also the author of the book, Do Not Ignore Your Mortality. And before the break, we were talking about the different situations as to what is an obstacle for planning, what are some things that come into place when those are challenged with planning end of life. Why is it so difficult to have the conversations? And then, of course, we started to dive into what is your legacy. That's Greg Barnsdale's quote that he likes to lead in conversation. Greg, I do want to ask you, of course, in getting to know you before today, you did share with me that you were diagnosed with having a brain tumor. And I know this impacts what your perspective of life has been since. Share with us a little bit about that journey and your takeaways from that. What did you learn that perhaps you didn't learn before, that you didn't know before?
Well, I guess the most ironic thing was, Adriana, is that I've spent, many years stressing to others about the importance of having their final affairs in order, having a will, having the life insurance that they need based on their objectives, and just being organized in that way, and openly communicating with their family in the process. But it just seems so ironic that here, after finally figuring out a good way to get this message across and hopefully help a lot of people, just after I published the book, I was diagnosed with a large brain tumor, as you said, and it floored me. I didn't know what to think. I actually came home, and my wife was working from home that day, and I didn't tell her for a couple of days, actually. I kept it to myself because I was assuming it was cancerous, and I was given a death sentence, and it was very shocking.
And obviously, so you had the procedure, and the outcome of that, how are you doing today with that?
Good. I've had three MRIs since the craniotomy just about a year and a half or so ago. I've got a 6-inch scar down the side of my head, but it's non-cancerous. It's an acoustic neuroma, and it all started with a ringing in my left ear. So if any listeners out there that are listening to this actually have tinnitus or a ringing in one ear, their medical professional should be recommending an MRI, because that's typically what notifies or confirms if it is a brain tumor. And in my case, it was a big one.
These are some good things to be on the lookout for. Switching gears, so I want to circle back to your book, and I want to talk about "Do Not Ignore Your Mortality." Talk to us about how you came to write this book, and what are our takeaways from it?
Well, my publishing coach, who was a very famous nonfiction author here in Canada, suggested that I should begin the book in a very unusual way. And I'm just going to read to you the introduction here. It's very brief, but it's very compelling. To all the dead people I have met over my career, I'm sure many of you did not have your affairs in order. The endless stories I have heard and overheard from your grieving relatives and friends clarify that many sour situations like yours could have been avoided. This has pushed me to the point of taking this bold stand. My commitment to all of you is to inspire many others to have their affairs organized. We both know the lingering regret of not being prepared lasts an awfully long time. And I think that really gets to the core of what my message is. It's just a quick read. People can read it in one sitting, and it talks about communication, funeral and burial and cremation planning, some basic information about estate planning, and it talks about wills and also personal directives or medical directives as well. But it stresses the fact that there's all kinds of information out there, and people should be leaning into this much more than they are.
Out of the subtopics within your book, which is the one least discussed?
I would say it would tend to be around medical directives. Here's a statistic that I quote in the book, and this is generally the case across Canada and the US and many other countries. But here in Canada, only about half the adult population has a current and valid will. And it surprises me, because here we are in a very progressive society. They said many other countries too, yet those statistics are terrible. So it proves to me, and I'm sure to many other people in the legal and financial world, et cetera, that people just aren't leaning into this as much as they should. And if they do, there are so many benefits.
So, what are the conversations that you've had with lawyers, attorneys about this? Because I'm sure that they're inevitable. So, in different scenarios, you've had to have that conversation on behalf of the family, or also just based on the situation of the planning and preparation. What is the common theme or concern that lawyers who represent the estate wills, just all of that? What comes up as their area of concern that that they're letting you know that they're tackling?
Well, a very similar theme, and whether that's someone working in the medical field or the legal field or financial and retirement planning, One of the most important things in regards to end of life planning is having a current and valid will in place. And I've heard that from all kinds of people in these various fields. And that's just one component of it. But it's important to really tailor this around the individual's goals and objectives, because as with retirement planning, everyone's situation is so different.
And that's true. And I find that to broach the subject, obviously that there's a cost that comes with a lot of planning and preparation. Do you find that in terms of whether it's middle class, upper class, do you feel that societal classes play a role as to whether or not somebody does their planning and preparation, even if they don't hire an attorney, but the type of planning, that whether or not they choose LegalZoom to put some of their stuff together? But do you find that societal classes play an instrumental role in the whole picture?
I have not done in-depth research in that regard, Adriana, but I know for a fact, and I stress, I took a lot of time to really make sure that I explained this well within my book. It's rather easy and very inexpensive these days to set up a will online. As an example, there are all kinds of platforms that allow people to do that very, very quickly and easily. And it's so important to make sure that the platform that you're using is using the rules within your area, because all the rules within one state or province, country, etc., they're all a little different, and the will has to be valid for that area. But if someone is paying child support, or they own some sort of ownership interest in a business, or they own property outside of the area where they live in another state or jurisdiction, they shouldn't be setting up a will online. They should be seeing a lawyer to do this, an experienced lawyer.
So then ideally it is to have legal counsel is ideal. But then so what you're saying is, but if you feel like if a person cannot, if one of our viewers is watching and they feel like it's not in the cards for them, that obviously there's some online platforms that can assist, and that's better than nothing. Okay.
Yes.
So what is your favorite chapter in the book that you just really spoke to you in terms of wanting for a great outcome for the reader to have a takeaway? What part of your book was your heart and soul?
The end, actually, because in the very end, I basically tell the reader, and this is available in audiobook form too, so it's not just a reader but listener, that I'm not embellishing any of this information within the book at all. It's based on my personal experience as a funeral director and financial planner and hospice volunteer that I've seen time and time again, and it's based on reality. And that's where I stress with people that although these conversations are not easy to have, and in some cases other family members simply don't want to have them, it's the lesser of two evils, because having the conversations now when time is plentiful and minds are clear makes all the difference.
What drew you to become a hospice volunteer?
Well, I've always wanted to be a hospice volunteer, and the timing just seemed to be right just within the last while to do that, actually, and I've really enjoyed it.
What was the takeaway that you heard so many times, or what was a common theme that was echoed when you connected with those that you were helping to serve?
After the fact, I've had many people say to me, Greg, I feel so much better having set up the insurance, set up the will, set up my power of attorney. I've been wanting to do this for years. Those types of comments. And that brings up something, Adriana. Have you ever heard of the hallway huddle?
No. Oh, wait. I think I have. Yes. Is that towards the end, that when the gathering, is it like the hero's walk?
Well, actually, in your area, it may relate to that too. But the hallway huddle that I'm familiar with is what I've heard from medical professionals, where they see families in the hall outside of a hospital room where their family member is about to die or has died, and they're huddled around, wringing their hands, wondering what the heck is going to take place next.
Okay. And so that obviously that's a intentional gathering together and just showing the solidarity for the family.
But more so in relation to not knowing what to do next, because in many cases, those situations where families are wringing their hands, wondering what to do, it's because there hasn't been any proactive planning.
Wow, that's pretty profound. And
Yeah.
in talking to those who were in hospice, what were what were some of the concerns that family members had? Obviously, that you had the level of unknown of not knowing when the day will come and all of that. What are some things that don't come to mind in everyday life that are some reminders for the rest of us that would be good to know?
Well, the biggest takeaway that I think I could share with your listeners here, Adriana, is the fact that the whole hospice industry so eagerly wants to get the word out there with the public about their unique service and what they provide. And I based on the research that I had done for my book, and that was one of the reasons that prompted me to be a little deeper into a hospice volunteer and really take part in it, is that it is such a unique service and it is so needed in our society. Even from the standpoint of volunteers being needed, they are in desperate need of help, and it's such a valuable resource. If this brain tumor that I had was cancerous, I would certainly want to die in a hospice rather
And
than anywhere else.
that's incredible. And of course, a testament to your resilience, and so thankful that your outcome is what it is today. And is it ever so it's never too late to start setting up. It's never too late to have the conversations. That's one thing that you want to press upon all of us, those who are watching.
That's right. As long as we have our mental faculties and we can make our own decisions, it doesn't matter of our age, as long as we are an adult and we can decide for ourselves. And this what are called testamentary rights, we all can make those decisions, and it's our right to do that. And I feel it's our obligation. Here's one example. Even if someone doesn't have much, they can still complete a will online to be able to make it so much easier for their family, make it easier to settle their estate. But one of the other things that it does is that it can let your family know if you want to be cremated or buried or recycled, for that matter. But if someone dies and the family doesn't know what the deceased wanted, that alone can be a big issue. And it's for them to have to make that decision, it can be very, very hard.
You mentioned before when you and I had spoken that this type of planning is actually good for the economy. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. As I said, the planning process reduces the stress of the person going through the process. It also leaves our survivors more financially and emotionally resilient. It tends to leave more meaningful legacies because people are planning, involving their families in the conversations. The planning process, the estate planning process, often can involve charities because there are significant tax benefits to involving charities within your estate planning. So charities benefit, and they desperately need the money to do their good work. And ultimately, what this does is that it takes immense pressure off the court system from having to deal with so many unorganized estates. So all of this together ultimately helps the economy. It's a huge win for us all.
And I never thought of it about it that way, but I think that that's, you're right, that there's a level of, there's a level of giving, of being able to connect with charitable organizations who are in turn, who have a mission of servitude based on the area in which that their mission is to serve. I think that's absolutely fantastic. We're going to continue this conversation, but first, this break. Stay put. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Thank you so much for watching The Health Revolution. Our show is growing, and it's all thanks to viewers like you. No matter how you found us, please hit the subscribe button so we can stay connected and continue to deliver amazing content to you.
Life is so fragile, and we're constantly reminded just how fragile life can be, especially when we or a loved one is told we have cancer. Cancer survivor myself, I can tell you, we still feel very alone in this journey.
There's a study that's been showing that patients who are socially isolated have a worse prognosis, have a worse outcome than patients who are socially interconnected.
Buddies for Life is a non-profit cancer support group for those whose life has been impacted by cancer. Humor, hope, heart, and hugs.
Humor, hope, heart, hugs, and a whole lot of love.
Share this with your friends and family and support this community in every way you can. No one should face cancer alone.
I am a chemo buddy for life.
We are a buddies network.
No one does cancer alone.
Be a buddy.
And we are all here for you as a community of love.
We are chemo buddies for life.
And if you've heard 3 words, you have cancer, for yourself or someone else, you belong with us at Chemo Buddies for Life.
Healing through connections.
We can take our own health into our own hands. Okay, so we'll kind of expand on that. So I take a lot of vitamins every day. Long before I started this business, my wife has had me taking my vitamin C, my B complexes, amino acids every single solitary day, and I still do, even though I still do IVs as well. But when you take vitamins orally, you get 15 to 20% of them. Some people get less because they have autoimmune issues. Some people have a lot of inflammation issues, whatever the case may be, so they don't get the absorption that they need to be getting. So they don't get their immune system built up. Doing the mobile IVs, I'm able to take your immune system, I'm able to naturally boost it.
Welcome back to the Health Revolution. We're spending some quality time with my guest today, Greg Barnsdale. He is the unusual undertaker. He's also the author of the book, Do Not Ignore Your Mortality. And Greg, one of the things that you and I talked about that I thought was an intriguing title, you wear several hats that support so many people in this area in end of life planning and just this stage of life. But you had mentioned to me that you're a death doula. Can you shed some light on what is defined as a death doula and how do you support families during this stage in life?
The name death doula is relatively new, but it's very similar to a birth doula. So being a hospice volunteer and coming to become a hospice volunteer as a funeral director, I was comfortable with end of life issues. But I would say, in my opinion, people who volunteer in that role within hospice organizations are also death doulas because they're really just helping at the time of a death.
And what are some things that they do in terms of support for the family? Is it so? I'm wondering out loud if it's just practical. If it's obviously there's a level of emotional support. Is there some sort of connection of resources out there? What all does that look like?
Well, I would imagine it's a little different based on different jurisdictions across the country and so on, but very similar. My role as a hospice volunteer was really just to be a friendly, sympathetic ear to the person that was dying and his or her family. The client that I was looking after for the last 9 months or so, he died actually about a month ago, and he and I became very close friends. So I would visit with him every Tuesday evening for about an hour and a half. And both of us really came to enjoy that. I ended up bringing my little dog Stella with me, and it was just a camaraderie. And then as he drew closer to the time where the doctors were telling him that it wasn't very far off, that his death was approaching, he wanted me to read to him from the Bible, which I did. And I think that gave him some additional comfort.
And, I can't help but wonder, you're surrounded by end of life scenarios. And for so very many people, at first glance, this can seem like it could feel defeating, and it could even be, you could have depressive moments. I'm only imagining. So how do you take care of yourself and check in with yourself to make sure that you are not that you're not being pulled down emotionally from some of the harder times that families are dealing with?
Well, I no longer work as a funeral director or a financial planner. I don't give advice to people one-on-one anymore. My full-time role is basically promoting this book across Canada and the US. It was written for both countries. But when I worked as a funeral director, it was, and I found this from my peers, coworkers as well, is that it allowed you to really become grounded in life, and it helped you appreciate every day that we have. And that's one of the things that I'm always trying to keep in mind, is that life is incredibly delicate and fragile. So every day that we do have is a blessing.
Agree on that one. Now, you're in Canada. Obviously, you've mentioned that the book is available on Amazon, and I'm assuming that as there continues to be a recognized need and the exponential growth, that your goal is to grow globally. Is that the overall mission, that whoever needs this, no matter where they are on planet Earth, that they're able to get their hands on the book?
Yes, as I said, Adriana, this book is really just a conversation starter to get readers thinking about the importance of having these conversations with their families. But whether the jurisdiction is a province here in Canada or within the States or the UK or Australia or wherever, the principles are still very much the same. Being proactive, having the conversations, and utilizing the help that's available, such as good financial planners and good lawyers, etc., makes all of this so much easier for those ultimately when we pass away.
Which industries that people represent in their line of work need to have this book on their bookshelf when they're talking to their clients?
Well, I think financial advisors do, because quite often financial advisors, well, very often, when I worked as a financial advisor, talking with people about their retirement planning, and I mentioned this in the book, I carefully worded this to stress the importance of the role of a financial advisor, who often works as a quarterback to bring in the lawyer or accountant, again, to help the clients with his or her personal objectives. But financial advisors can certainly benefit from this book, because it clearly identifies in so many different ways how they help clients, and lawyers too.
And lawyers, I would imagine physicians perhaps, or those in the medical field, and probably tax accountants. And I can only imagine that the library would, obviously that would be a great tool and resource. Who else would you think that, maybe not at first glance, would benefit from allowing their clientele to know that this is a resource that is helpful?
Well, I think it may be a better way for me to explain this, Adriana, is the fact that my target market, the audience that I'm looking to share this message with, is really anyone over the age of 40 with a pulse, which is a pretty wide market. And as I said, it relates to anyone really anywhere. The consistent theme is just get thinking about these things, and always be mindful that life could end at any point. And here's one quick tip that I'm always suggesting to people. It can make it so much easier for our survivors if our survivors know where to find all of our login credentials. And I know that's a very simplistic sort of thing, but I've talked to a lot of people who have spent countless hours trying to shut down various accounts and access them because they didn't know computer passwords.
And that's not a practical, but yet it could be a serious roadblock how you paint that. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Stay right there. We're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this. Welcome back to the Health Revolution. Welcome back, everybody. My guest today is Greg Barnsdale. He is the unusual undertaker, the author of the book, Do Not Ignore Your Mortality. Greg, where are you in the virtual space? Where can we find you?
I'm on all the primary platforms such as YouTube and X and LinkedIn. My website, donotignoreyourmortality.com, is the best place to reach me and also find links to where my book can be purchased. But I'm constantly trying to post on the various social media platforms, again, to get people thinking about these things and put out compelling content that will capture attention.
And what has been, as you're engaging with your followers and the virtual audience, what are some things, can you name the top 2 areas of concern that come up that you're noticing a trend?
Okay. Well, I guess the most interesting thing that has happened out of all of this since I started this journey was after I told my wife that I had a brain tumor. I left her in the house and I went out to the vehicle waiting for her. She wanted to call her girlfriend. She was devastated, as you can imagine. And at that point, we didn't know if my brain tumor, which I was told was large, was cancerous or not. And we were assuming it was cancerous because the ear, nose, and throat specialist wanted an appointment right away on the Monday morning. So I finally told her Saturday morning. She was in tears. She called her friend. I went out to the vehicle to give her a bit of space, knowing she'd come out and we were going to go to the mall or something just to get out of the house. And I recorded a brief little video, basically just indicating I just told my wife I had a large brain tumor, and if it's cancerous, I have some big decisions to make. Well, my stepdaughter suggested a couple of days before the brain surgery, a couple of months later, that we put it on TikTok, and it has been viewed over 1.7 million times at this point.
Somebody went viral for all the good reasons. That's fantastic.
But isn't that ironic, Adriana, that these statistics prove in regards to will planning, there's a huge gap between people's good intentions and actually leaning into this and getting a will set up. Yet so many people are intrigued by somebody perhaps dying that they tune into it to that extent.
Absolutely. These are some incredible points to remember. And of course, we are running out of time. Greg Barnsdale, the unusual undertaker, author of the book, Do Not Ignore Your Mortality. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and your input and your valuable information. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for all our viewers, of course, you can find us on the web. It's thehealthrevolutiontv.com for more show information. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Of course, you can subscribe to our newsletter. On the upper left-hand corner, you will see our QR code. If it's easier for you to grab, absolutely go ahead and grab it there. We want to give a special shout out to our sponsors of our TV show. We have Biomed Mobile IV, Dapper Mobile Apps, KO Photography, and Ultra Health Solutions. Thank you for supporting our show. And as always, you can find us on E360 TV every Tuesday and Thursday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern every week. We are kicking off season 3, and we are so glad you are here for it. So are we. That's all the time that we have. Until next time, take care of yourselves. We will see you soon.